All right, this time on the dirt head shed, it's go time. I gotta finish, not this thing, we already finished that. We gotta finish this Nissan up. All right, we're back in the shop, and you'll probably notice this thing actually has a roll pan on it now. I kind of like did a little bit of work on the side, just came out here in the evenings and like welded on a roll pan on this. I pulled that bar out that was holding the bed sides in, I test fitted the tailgate, and we're kind of moving along. This is kind of a trick, this has been an old school trick since the 50s probably, putting roll pans on trucks, either front or rear. This one in the 90s, like roll pans on mini trucks were super hot. And this one I bought like 2 years ago. It's from Grant Fabrications, and they're just a really clean piece to like make the back of the truck look smooth. It the factory one had like a little spot for a license plate and a bunch of random sheet metal back there, but typically they would have a bumper on here. This is just sort of a way to get rid of the bumper and smooth out the back of the truck. I went through and I did a bunch of body work already on the corners. I welded it in. I welded a couple spots through here, and I did some extra bracing underneath so that hopefully I don't drag this thing on the ground and just peel it off of there. Anywho, I just wanted to catch you up to speed on where I'm at. The air system is like mocked up. We did that last episode. The bed is pretty much welded, and I think what I need to do is button up a little bit of body work on this real quick. Then we're gonna pull the bed off the truck, finish up the air system on this, button up everything under the rear, like paint, do all the stuff that we need to do on the rear suspension, get that thing buttoned up, and then we gotta move on to the front. This thing needs front shocks, inner fender wells, all this stuff under the hood mounted, seat mounts, air system plumbed and wired, and the bed looking cool. So it's gonna be a long week. I just gotta start by spreading Bondo. Gotta spread some more Bondo. Bondo. Sorry, U-POL lightweight filler, fantastic. I did the welding and grinding the other night, and I got out here last night and got the first coat of the fiberglass filler, the fiberglass reinforced stuff that you typically want to run right over welds. So got that kind of blocked down, and we're going to do our first coat of regular filler on it right now. This is just like what you would think of as normal Bondo, lightweight body filler. This is from a brand called U-POL, something, U-P-O-L. And I love it. They're selling this stuff at O'Reilly now, so you're actually able to go and get like really good quality body supplies there now, which has been nice. Mix this up, try not to get too many pinholes in it, and we'll go run over those corners of the bed with it. This thing has always seemed like ultra clean to me, this truck, and to my surprise, when I started doing the roll pan, it turns out that other bed side, the driver's side over there, has had a bunch of repair to it. The whole corner was like smashed in at one point and body worked and repaired. So kind of made me feel a little less guilty about modifying things on this truck. It's not quite the extra perfect survivor that I had envisioned, which makes me feel a little better about chopping it up as much as I did. Not that I ever really feel bad about chopping cars up. I am definitely not a restoration guy. I am a modify it and enjoy it as your own guy. And if a restored one is what makes you happy, more power to you. Modified one is what makes me happy. Personalized. Kind of going heavy on this coat, just I know I'm gonna knock a lot of it down. There was a pretty big transition from the roll pan to this corner. I kind of needed a little high to get this blend to work right. All right, that's dry enough. Let's knock that down with some 80 grit. I had 36 on here, and that's just kind of more than we need. Seems like 80 grit actually just does a better job all around. 36 is good though when you're trying to really get the next layer to stick, which I wanted with that that Marglass or that fiberglass and reinforced filler. Come on, tool, let's do this. Yeah, we're gonna have this thing looking good in no time. That last coat was so much fun, I figured I'd mix up some glaze putty. This is kind of the final smear before primer. This is thinner and gets into the pinholes and stuff quite a bit better. So, pretty stoked. This roll pan really isn't fighting me too bad. And after doing the body work on this Jeep in front of me, like, I didn't do a very good job on it at all, and the paint looks great. So if I give this a pretty good effort, I feel like we're gonna be good to go. Man, I remember doing my first roll pan, and I think it was on my first Nissan, and I made it myself. And holy cow, I chased Bondo all the way across the thing, trying to get it smooth. This one, I haven't actually even checked to see how smooth it is across there, but it feels like it's all much better quality than that homemade thing that I made in 1998. Let that set up and then we'll block that down. I'll probably sand this one 80 grit rough and then 150 for the final, and that'll basically be ready for primer. I'll clean this up before it kicks off on me. It's funny, this is such a simple mod, doing the roll pan, but man, they can be a pain to do and a total time suck. Man, this side fits so much better. That side's good enough, but this one's awesome. This side's never had a bunch of damage to it. That's what's going on. This side, the driver's side's had like a quarter panel repair or something going on. Super clean. I like it. The body works close enough. I can kind of call it good for now. The next thing I want to get done is sort of smooth out these welds in here. There is just a ton of welding that was done, and I would like to try and smooth it out just a little bit so that with some seam sealer and maybe like a Raptor liner at some point, this sort of appears stock-ish. I know it'll never be like super smooth looking, but I can try. You gotta give it a little bit of an effort. I got a fresh 40 grit on here, so we're just gonna kind of take our time. That's quite a bit better. Just a little bit of sanding and getting some of that burnt paint out of there helps a lot. Definitely not perfect, but I think with a little swipe of seam sealer and maybe a little Raptor liner at some point, this thing's gonna look totally good. All right, I'm gonna keep cleaning, grinding those front corners, and then just kind of keep prepping this bed so that it's getting closer and closer to done. The paint prep begins. I'm using this Sprayway glass cleaner, non-ammonia foaming action. This stuff has proven to be a really good prep for paint stuff. It doesn't ever seem to cause problems. I'm gonna go ahead and scuff this thing up with red Scotch-Brite. Make sure all the like soot and loose paint is gone. And this front of the bed and the bottom of the bed and all that should be pretty quick and easy to do. Doing the inside of the bed will probably take a little bit more work, but we should be able to paint this thing here pretty soon. There's still a bunch of dirt in here from when I first bought this thing. Oh yeah, it's nasty. Nasty. That's so much better. This truck had a bed liner in it its entire life, and it's actually in pretty good shape. I just didn't ever really do a very good job of like detailing this thing out before I started on my process of modifying it. Kind of paying for it now. The primer I'm going to use is this PPG Omni MP170, I think is what it is. It's an epoxy primer. It's actually one of the primers that I got from the recycle yard at the dump. The right hardener for it, and I've got some epoxy reducer, so I'm going to spray this stuff out pretty thin. This is just sort of considered my direct metal sealer kind of thing. I'm not really trying to build this primer up a lot. I'm going to use this little detail gun. Everything's a mess. Get my respirator. Alright, let's go make something happen. I kind of went in here and just buried this thing in primer. The back side of the roll pan. Just trying to get as much material basically on the back sides of all this stuff as I can. The thing with this epoxy primer though, you really don't want to, you don't want it super thick, so I probably screwed that up. I'm going to try to do a little lighter coats now. Gotta remember, this isn't a high build primer, this is just a direct to metal. Alrighty, that's looking pretty good. Looking good. Oh, I ran that good, huh? Let's go do the roll pan. This roll pan will end up getting polyprimered, or sorry, urethane primer. So I'm really just doing this primer just on the bare metal. I'm trying to be pretty careful about making sure I'm getting everything painted, but holy cow, I don't think there's any way I could actually really get everything, like the edges of the roll pan and everything. It's pretty wild. That's why a lot of these custom cars don't last very long in the real world. Rust is always an issue. I'm going to mix up some urethane primer for the roll pan. This is what will spray over the Bondo, spray over the whole thing now, and this is what I'll like sand and block in order to get all those sand scratches out. So I want to get this on there pretty quick, that way I have time to let it dry and also sand it and block it out a little bit. I really want to try and get paint on this thing today. Probably rushing it, but we used this on the bed on the Jeep truck thing, and it worked really well. This is Gentech, some body shop supply place in North Idaho. I bought this over there, and it's kind of an off-brand, but it seems to work good. Still using the little tiny detail gun. It worked pretty good on that first round, so just cleaned it out, and we'll try it on this one. This one should be good. This is how we get rid of the sand scratches and little tiny pinholes and stuff. Man, I haven't even used up that cup. Some pinholes in this. I'm just going to kind of work them in. Let's mix up a little bit more. I think I'm good for another coat. I'll let that flash for a second, and then we'll throw a little bit more on it. All right, I've got a few coats of primer on this roll pan, and I did pick up an infrared heater at the local tractor store. I had got one from Home Depot this morning, but the bulb was broken right out of the box, so I ran and picked this one up. I'm gonna kind of bake this primer in, hope it cures quick, and then we can start block sanding this thing and try and get some white paint on all of this stuff here pretty soon. Is it ready? I let it bake for probably, I don't know, I moved that lamp around for about 2 hours, and then I went and made dinner. And now I'm back out. I'm gonna just try and block this down in like 400 grit and see if it doesn't clog the paper up too bad. It's clogging it up a little bit, but it's powdering okay. And I fully intend on painting this truck at some point, doing a full color change on it. So this white paint that I'm gonna shoot on it is just kind of to have it look presentable for now, you know. I did kind of a sort of guide coat on here. Guide coat is when you primer and you throw like a little bit of dark colored spray paint over the primer, and that just helps you see where your low spots are or your high spots. This one, I went ahead, I primered everything light gray, and then I went through and I added a whole bunch of black paint in with the coat of primer, the final coat. So this top coat of primer is really dark gray. The primer below it is light gray. So I kind of know, like, if I get into that light gray primer, not to really get going too much farther, because then I'll be going through all the primer. We're getting pretty close though. Check it out. I got the blocking done. You can kind of see how that guide coat primer worked, where you can see where some spots were high and others were low. I think I'm good to go as far as painting the roll pan. I'm gonna end up shooting the roll pan and the bottom of the quarter panel from that stripe down. We'll shoot that with base coat white and then throw a little clear on it, and that'll be sort of my blend. And then we're gonna end up shooting single stage on the inside of the bed, I think. So let me scuff up a couple more things and we'll tape off those quarter panels, and then we'll get to spraying. I'm gonna tape right along the bottom of this little swoop stripe. This side is actually kind of funky because it's had repair work done, and this side of this stripe is actually clear coated over where it shouldn't be from the factory. Shouldn't have any clear on it. So there's already been a little bit of repair and hack work done. So a little bit more is not gonna hurt, right? I'm gonna pull that back a little bit and give myself a soft edge. What I'm gonna do is shoot white down here, and I won't take white all the way up to there, so there'll be kind of like a blend through here, and then I'll clear coat the whole thing up to that stripe. So I do have to Scotch-Brite it. I gotta scuff it up, get all this dirt and like scuff marks out, because I don't want to clear over those and then never be able to get rid of them. So any of this dirt that's in here, you want to make sure you use a Scotch-Brite, get all that dirt off so that you don't end up burying it in clear. And then you want to make sure you scuff all the way up to that line, all the shininess gone. That way the new clear sticks. This thing's gonna be looking good in no time. Here's what we're spraying today. Duplicolor Paint Shop Championship White. I didn't bother trying to color match the paint to the rig. I just figured this should be close enough by the time it's all mixed. And we do a little blend and we should have what we need. So this is just a super cheap, basic, $30 a quart base coat. And I'll shoot some clear on top of it, and probably that Poppy's patina clear that I used on the Jeep. This stuff is so thin. It comes pre-thinned. You don't have to like thin it extra. And holy cow, it is like water. Let's see if this stuff wants to cooperate. Turn that down. I must have been shooting clear out of this last. We'll do like a really light coat on the first one and let it tack up. Make sure I don't have any like chemical reactions going on or something. Man, paint is fun. I need to reduce this paint. It's actually kind of thick. It's kind of like spider webbing out of the gun. All right, the first coat's already tacking off. This stuff runs fairly dry. I'm gonna give it a little more air pressure. And we'll paint like we mean it. This is rad. I'm stoked I'm gonna end up with a painted roll pan, not just forever primer, you know? It's pretty common to see a mini truck rolling around with primer all over it. I know I did a fair share of it. Check out that blend. It actually turned out really good. I can't tell where one color stops and one starts. My bodywork's a little questionable, but it's good enough. And I think we're done with base coat. It's time to throw the clear on it now. I'm gonna use this Poppy's Patina glossed out clear coat. I used this on the wheels in Mom's Spaghetti. I used the flat, or the semi-gloss on a bike frame. And the whole bed of the orange Jeep is shot with this stuff. So it's proven to be really good. I like it. It doesn't really doesn't seem like it sticks to everything. So it's really like you can shoot it and it doesn't really seem like it makes a huge mess. Let's mix it up 4-to-1 and shoot some on the rig. Get that catalyst worked in there really good. 33 coats of clear. I need that jelly to shine. They go the whole length of the panel you're working on. Earlier I was able to run base coat, so I'm going to be really careful not to run this. I got a run trying to happen over here. I got to try and fix it. It's unacceptable. I'm going to take some tape, fold it back on itself, and just kind of try to drag that up. It's not working at all. I can't mess with that anymore. It's like on the nicest part of the thing too. Dang it. Yeah, you can kind of see it, but not too bad. So cool. I'm stoked on this. That heat lamp is in here doing a good job. I've got it kind of just baking in here. I undercoated just rattle can with that Malco undercoating. And we did a whole bunch of that last night. I say we, it was just me out here. And yeah, I was like spraying here and trying to get up in that spot and just blasted this thing, the roll pan with undercoating. I tried to like wipe the undercoating off. The clear wasn't dry all the way, so I ended up like wiping paint and primer and clear and all kinds of stuff off. So a little bit of a repair job this morning and we're kind of back in action. Not perfect, but none of this is. All right, let's get this thing back on this table and out of the way for a little bit. Very slowly. Come on. Let's get this thing out of the way so we can get that truck back on the lift. We got a lot of work to do. Let's not crash that roll pan into something. Truck bed takes up more space than I expected. I need to be able to work on the rear suspension and welding on the back of the cab. That should be a pretty good spot for it. All right, let's rack this thing up, start tearing it down. Going up again. Up, up, up. Give it the old safety jiggle. I've got the arms pretty far forward on the front so that if I take a bunch of weight off the back, the thing won't tip over, hopefully. The goal right now is to blow this whole suspension and everything apart, take the links off, the bags off, all these parts out from Ride Tech that I made the mounts for the other day. We'll get that done, wheels, tires off, and start painting this, start welding and finishing this back wall. I feel like I've had these off 100 times in the last month. 101 now. Air tank, out. Valve block, out. Compressors, out. Come on out of there. That's gonna be it. There we go. Need to tap those brackets out. That can go. It can stay over here in the paint department though. Oh, I'm bleeding. Great. Now, before I get too far into the chassis work, I've got to figure out all these weld seams that I've got going on in here. I went to O'Reilly and picked up this U-Paul Fantastic Seam Sealer the other day, and I'm gonna go ahead and get started seam sealing this stuff just because sometimes it takes a while for it to dry, and I want to be able to paint this bed floor pretty soon. So I'm gonna go for it. I was totally worried about seam sealing it and having it look kind of crummy, but it doesn't look any worse than some of this weld, and like some of the welding and stuff just is not ready for paint. And I don't really want to do like a bed liner yet. So I'm gonna seam seal it. This is a trick that my neighbor AJ told me about, where I was using glass cleaner to like help smear the seam sealer smoothly. He said try wax and grease remover. It actually like is far slicker than the glass cleaner is gonna be. So we're gonna try it out. I'm gonna start up here where I can't really screw it up too awful bad. So far so good. This stuff is quite a bit better than some of the seam sealers I've used in the past. This actually feels like it might spread and level okay. If this ends up looking good and I can paint over it, I am gonna be stoked. That looks so good. All right, I've got to admit, I am really happy that I decided to go ahead and do this part of the job. I was so ready just to like paint the bed floor and then just start making excuses why you could see the welds and all that. But it's coming together amazingly well. I'm stoked on it. I'm gonna finish getting this seam sealer down let it dry for a few hours. I'll spray a little bit more gray primer on it since this is black seam sealer, and I'm gonna paint the bed floor white. That would probably not go over too well. So I'm gonna let it dry pretty good, and then yeah, like I said, primer it with that epoxy primer, just so that we have a like shot at getting white to cover it. Stoked. I can't, dude, this is just rad. I was so worried about having to feel like I was gonna have to like undo this or live with it looking like crud until I was able to get the thing right aligned or something. And go through and just kind of smooth that transition out a little bit. This is the best seam sealer I've ever used. I even used the more expensive U-Paul brand on the Jeep truck thing. I used their Tiger Seal is what it's called, and I think I like this better, at least for what I'm doing. This actually kind of flows out after you get it in place. It like takes its time and kind of smooths itself out. It's really cool. All right, I've got the axle suspended in there with just some pieces of all thread that go into the bag mounts. So it's good to go. Now I can get in here and kind of finish welding some of these things like these link bracket tabs and just kind of go through and make sure all my stuff is finalized. I want to like go and cap off the back side of these bed mounts and stuff like that. So we'll do a bunch of welding. I want to finish the back of this cab, and while I'm doing all that, I'll probably also start prepping and painting these link bar shocks and tailpipe. That way all this stuff just kind of comes together at the same time, hopefully. Let's lower this down and get busy on some of that welding project stuff. All right, let's kick off the fab work today with just a couple little brackets or a couple little plates. Basically 2x1 and 2x1. Sweet, let's go make something. Oh, that's 1 inch. And if I got 4 inch, yeah. All right, we're gonna make our 2 little caps out of that chunk of steel there. That's just some random 1/8 inch plate that got cut up for something else. We will repurpose it for this. Make quick work out of it with the grinder here. I'm excited to paint the inside of that bed. Yeah, that looks good. That can be for that one. That can be for that one. Let me grab a little sander and we can make those fit right. I just kind of rounded the corners off so the tab fits in here nice and clean, and we can get a weld around those corners. That'll work. Nice. I love the way this welder runs. This should be a cool little trick that helps out later on. So I'm going to take this 3/8 solid bar and weld it in here with a little bit of a gap between the frame and it. This axle doesn't actually ever go up and fully bottom out the notch. And basically this is just going to be something so that I have something to zip tie all these air lines and wires and everything going to the back. I'll have something to zip tie them to while they're on their way to the back of the rig. And it'll keep them kind of like out of harm's way, you know. I'm going to go cut this one and we'll weld that one in there as well. Gotta remember, it doesn't really have to be any bigger than the thickness of a zip tie, you know? That's all that's going to be going through that space. That ought to hold up some wires. So this is something that I've been kind of like annoyed with the whole time I've owned this rig. It's got this section that is like not boxed. The frame is boxed from here all the way forward, and then it went to this like box shock mount area, and the whole thing that I built is all boxed. So I've got this one little section that is not boxed in. So I just came up with some quick little 1/8" plate, boxing plates to kind of fill that in. So I'm gonna weld this in real quick. I'll do the best I can on that side. That side's got like brake components and a gas tank right there. But this is one of those little details that's been bothering me that I'm about to take care of, so I'm stoked. All right, let me grab the welder and we'll tack this thing in. I went ahead and primed this already on the back side, so we won't have too big of a problem with this thing rusting out. Also, there's only so much you can do, you know? I can do better than that. I did not fit that very well. Let's try that over again. Jeez, I thought I was ready to go. Well, this plate's going to get welded in about 6 spots, but I'm not going to... Whoa, I was looking right at it. But I'm not going to weld it solid. I got both of those little boxing plates in. That was pretty cool. I think it's time to focus some attention back on the bed, though. It's getting late in the evening, and it's time to throw some primer on the over that seam sealer. It's had enough time to dry enough to primer over it, and then we can shoot some white paint on this thing tonight. All right, I busted out a quick masking job on this while I was talking to my buddy Mark on the phone. I think we're ready to shoot. I'm going to shoot the primer basically right over where I have the black seam sealer, and that should just kind of help with the adhesion on the white paint. Let's go and mix up some primer and knock that part out, and then I'll show you what we're using for paint. I don't really know if I'm doing this right or not. I'm just doing it. A lot of this is just assuming that I need to be doing it a certain way. Let's do this. Looking good. Good enough. All right, let's shoot some white paint. Let's see. Is this the stuff? That's black. Here's the white paint I got. Finish One single stage. I just picked this up from Napa, and I've had good luck with Finish One primers in the past, and I've used quite a bit of it actually. So I figured if they've got a single stage that's off the shelf and pre-mixed, I'm willing to shoot some of that in the bed. All we're trying to do is sort of like clean this thing up a little bit. So if it's great, it'll be awesome. If it's mediocre, that's acceptable too. Oh, this needs a whole lot of mixing. Wow, it is like rock solid in the bottom there. Alright, I'm going to be here a while mixing this paint. This stuff is going to be catalyzed. You mix it 2-to-1, I think, with this catalyst here. This stuff was $74 for the quart, and then the catalyst I think was $25 or something. So it's like $100 worth of paint right here, which Kind of frustrating, but that's how it goes. I'm going to use the little detail gun again, but I did put a little swivel fitting on it, so hopefully that hose doesn't get in the way when I'm trying to get up under the bed rail and stuff. So let's go shoot some paint, see how it works. I don't really know what to expect, if this is going to be like good or just barely better than rattle can. I'm kind of expecting barely better than rattle can. I'm going to go for all of the really hard to reach areas first, up under the bed rails and stuff. And I think I will rotate the nozzle towards vertical. See if that helps. Oh yeah, that's going to work good. That definitely got the paint under there. Holy cow. Cool. I think we're in business. Let me get that run real quick. That might have been in the primer. Sweet. We're moving. It feels like this stuff's sort of tacking up. It's doing its catalyzing thing. It is getting a massive amount of overspray over on that toolbox. That's sort of bound to happen though. I'm gonna keep spraying and see what we can make happen. So hopefully the inside of this bed's all white by the end of the night. Pretty rad. I don't think I'm gonna film a ton of spraying it because I don't want to ruin my camera, because this stuff is getting on everything. All right, and I mix up some more and go shoot that stuff on there. That was a gnarly paint session. Whew, probably have white paint all over my face. Tell you what, shooting white single stage gets everywhere. But it looks great from here. It looks really good. I did a little bit of a trick and I threw some clear coat in the very last clear, or the last cup of white paint. So it should gloss up a little bit more than it would have normally, but it wasn't, it was only like 50-50. This part's a little weird to me. The whole front edge of this thing looks like it's like a cream white, which I don't know what's going on there, if it's just the light or what. This up here looks bright white, maybe a little tint to it, but this, man, this is like a whole different color. So I'm gonna let this dry. Not much else I can do. It's the inside of a 30-year-old truck bed and it looks awesome. So rad. Stoked. All right, I'm gonna clean up. We'll get back out here first thing in the morning. It's late and I've kind of had enough for the day. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. The paint on the bed looks pretty good this morning. It's actually hardening up okay, doing all the stuff it's supposed to. That's cool. I do have a bunch of overspray on stuff like the air compressors and some shocks that I have over there. But that's my own dumb fault for not covering all that up. Right now I'm just going in here and getting started on this back wall. Time to kind of button this thing up. This spot up top is also wanting to burn through real easy. If you remember back, I cut this whole section of this back wall out just because I was so frustrated with how it was welding. And it's much better now, but it's still not perfect. I guess I'll go make the other side match, and then we'll come in and start making all our little tiny little filler pieces to kind of finish this thing off. Those turned out pretty good. I want to do something in here to like stiffen this a little bit, make it a little bit more like factory. And I've got an idea for a piece that'll work there. Let's go outside and see. I don't want to just like, I wanted to like make a little 1/2 inch raised like sheet metal deal that would go along the whole side and just tack weld on so that it looks kind of factory, but I can't use my sheet metal brake right now because it's on the ground, not on a bench. So I've got an idea for a piece that might work out here. Hi Hazel. Let's go over here by the pacer. I think parts of this old gate will work. It's galvanized. It's pretty tall though. Yeah, this is kind of the shape that I'm looking for. It's just quite a bit bigger than I was expecting. Maybe I'll go back inside and figure out what to use. All right, I'm back here by my metal rack, metal pile, trying to find things that would work. All right, down here at the end, I've actually got this. This was under my back patio when I moved in here. And this is, I believe, an inside bed panel from like a Chevy truck or something. I'll bet you if I just trim this thing down and drill a couple more spots in it, I can spot weld this thing on and it'll help keep that flex down quite a bit. That's cool. I knew I had something that would work. This is going to be so good. I think all I need to do is figure out the width, and then I'll cut this thing down in the middle, weld it back together, and then that way I can basically spot weld this thing on through the holes that it has, and then we'll seam seal the whole thing so that it should be a watertight seal. Quick and easy. I'm gonna have to keep my eyes peeled at the wrecking yards for more of these, because if you can just unbolt this off a tailgate and they're cheap, like this is a great solution for all kinds of work for like floor pans and stiffening braces and all that. Let's go figure out how to weld it up. All right, now that I can't see anything again, let's go fit this onto the back wall. I've got a few marks across the back wall there. I think we're pretty dang good. I think I am gonna actually tech screw this thing in real quick. Nope, I'm just gonna tack it. I got a welder right here. Get that kind of where I think it needs to live. And that kind of where I think it needs to live. I got that side just barely tacked on. It is hanging on by a thread. How's this gonna work? Okay, hanging on by a thread. Oh, my hand. Whew. And I'm really just trying to get a few tacks across. I want this thing tight enough to where it's kind of putting a little pressure on that back wall. I'm gonna go ahead and probably rosette weld all these existing holes. I'll do a few little welds around the perimeter of it, and then by the time I tack through these and all that, it's gonna be pretty solid. It'll end up getting a seam seal around the whole thing to keep the water out as well. I just spent quite a bit of time going through the back wall and finished welding up all that I'm gonna do. I went and added little filler plates to all of the ribs, the original ribs, to the flat sheet metal. So those are all blocked in with sheet metal. There's tacks and welds on both sides. There's stitch welds, there's tacks. It's kind of an ugly mess, but I'm about to go and sand down a bunch of the high spots. By the time we throw some seam sealer and primer on this thing, it's gonna look like $1 million, or slightly less than $1 million. I love it. This thing looks awesome. All the sanding and, well, all the grinding of welds is done. And now I'm going to mask this thing off so we can get our seam sealer and primer and all that done. It'll be like the same program as the bed. I'm gonna primer it. I'm gonna scuff it up right now. So we'll get the tape on here, and then I will Scotch-Brite everything inside of the tape line. And then we'll get in here. We'll primer it with that epoxy primer again, and then I'll seam seal it. So kind of taking a bunch of precaution on this because I do want this thing to last a long time. I know I keep saying that, but it's kind of the truth. Trying to get around all these old grind marks and stuff like that to make sure I get as much of this primed as I can. All right. Kind of going back and forth on this, if I should do this black or if I should do this white. We'll see. I gotta scuff it, get primer on it, get the seam sealer on it, and all that. And we can worry about the color later on. I guess I'm ready to shoot some primer again. Seems like I'm painting more than I am fabbing on this job. But I'm gonna start in the middle and work my way out. Oh, come on. What's going on here? There we go. I am gonna blast everything. Kind of used car lot style. It's been a long time, holy cow. I cut this truck apart almost 3 years ago. This was the one that was like, I was getting going on it, and then we got laid off of the dirt every day, and man, I just lost all momentum. I had no desire to work on anything for a little bit. So to get back onto it is pretty cool. Whew. There's going to be a whole lot of primer and we don't have to film at all. Look at that. It's got seam sealer on it, looking all good, primered up. It's time to paint. It's time to paint it now. Let me show you what we're using. When I was at Napa the other day, I went ahead and bought some Coach Black. I hope that is sort of a gloss black. If it's anything like that white, I'm gonna have to mix it like crazy because that was terrible. But we're gonna shoot the chassis and the back wall, single stage, finish one black. This should go pretty good. I hope it does at least. I'm gonna just shoot this as single stage. I'm not gonna add any clear on this just because I'm not too concerned about how glossy it is really. Oh, this is good. It is mixed up just fine. That's gonna be cool. Now this was 75 bucks, right? And nowadays a can of spray paint is almost 10, or sometimes at the auto parts store it's like 13. So if you figure this is probably, you probably get 6 cans worth of spray paint or 7 cans worth of spray paint. I feel like this is still quite a bit better deal than using spray paint as far as cost goes. What I really hope is that the quality is far superior. We will find out. Here we go. Fan it out a little bit. Oh man, this is gonna be good. I'm just kind of throwing a little bit of little light coat on the bottom of the gas tank. Just kind of blasting everything, you know. This is getting to be a mess. I sure hope this is getting good coverage and being good quality paint. Because man, it is. I'm like dripping the paint out of the cup on myself and on the floor, and it's definitely a little more messy than using rattle cans. I'm just hoping that the end result is just a little bit nicer. I'm trying to get the bottom side of everything painted first, just so that when I go to do the top, I can kind of like give it a nice wet coat and make at least the top of the bag mounts and all the stuff that you see from up top look nice and glossy. I think what I want to do is get the work from the top down, so I'll do this, the back wall of the cab. Alright, I got the whole thing painted. Whew, this is another gnarly day of work. Alright, it is Friday morning. If I'm supposed to actually be on the road on Sunday, it's going to be a miracle. But check it out, we're making progress. The paint actually is curing. It looks really good. It is so glossy. But that's alright. I wouldn't normally paint something this glossy just because it's not really my jam. But gloss actually will like be easier to keep clean. It'll be easier to like make sure that it doesn't get like road salt and stuff stuck to it. Basically easier to hose off. I do have some like, it's really tacky over the seam sealer, and that's a bummer because the seam sealer in the bed turned out great, but the seam sealer on the cab I wasn't able to like cure overnight, and it's just tacky. So I'm going to throw that heat lamp inside the cab while I work on other stuff, and hopefully it'll like heat up the back wall and help with the curing process. But look at this thing. It's kind of weird. It's like super 90s street rod style because it's like overly glossy, and I like painted over a rusty old drive shaft, and you can totally tell. But I love it. I think it's going to be great. I'm going to paint the link bars and the rear shocks and the rear like cage thingy and get that done while I'm getting this the heat lamp going, and then we're gonna kick some butt. I have a lot of work to do. We haven't even touched the front suspension yet. There's a bunch to do up there. All right. Like I said before, let's get busy. Wild. Looks like some sort of Halloween like haunted Nissan pickup. All right, bake. Bake, you silly seam sealer. All right, I'm gonna peel the paper off this thing, and then we'll start getting ready to paint those parts right there. All right, I might be in trouble. I primered all these parts, and they are not curing at all. They are not drying. Maybe they are. It just doesn't feel right. It's still kind of tacky. It's about an hour later. It should be kicking off. So I drug the heat lamp over here. I'm trying to like bake this thing and see if we can get this figured out. It's not looking good. Oh man. I really don't have to wipe all this stuff off and start over. But I might have to. Dang it! Dang it. Gosh, it looks so good. If it would just dry, it would be even better. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Just remember, fellas and fellettes, don't get your paint supplies from the dump. And don't try to be a chemist if you're not really familiar with what you're doing. I just put myself behind big time on this, but it's actually cleaning up. It's doing its thing. We will prevail. Second side, same as the first. Look how sticky that is. Junk. I think I might have redeemed myself. I've got primer on the shocks and links in that rack, and everything is looking good. I used some primer that I got from my neighbor AJ, and catalyst that actually goes with it, so I think we're good to go. I'm now going to get in here and start doing the paint side of things. And I've got this Omni base coat, and it's like a charcoal color. I had an 05 Ram pickup years ago, and I did some damage to it, and I bought this paint so that I could do repairs on it. I never did it, so I got a whole quart of this, what is it? Mineral gray. It's like a charcoal gray. So let's mix this up, and then we will shoot that on all those parts. We'll get some clear on it, and then I gotta call it a night. It's been a long day. It's like 9 o'clock now. I already stirred this up pretty good earlier, just checking the color. But it's just a nice metallic charcoal gray. And this stuff you mix 1 to 1. We'll probably need about that much paint. That's just right on. This is 1 to 1, basically just base coat and reducer. I don't know if I said hardener earlier. If I did, I was wrong. Base coat doesn't get hardened or catalyzed usually. Pretty good looking though. Pretty good looking. Kind of dark, but I think it's going to be, it should be a good accent color. It's not going to be over the top, and it's not going to be something that I'm like tired of in 3 weeks. I'm not going to do them teal or something and then be like, dang it, now I got to repaint those. This color should stay cool for a long time. All right, let's make these parts look cool. Oh, heck yeah. I gotta be careful not to run this. I always get super excited and like spray too quick and too much material. And it's really easy, especially on these parts where you're like trying to get paint into all these little nooks and crannies. It's really easy to run it because you're just getting more material in certain spots than you want to. 3 pretty good coats of that charcoal gray on here. Shocks, look, those are like seriously like $19 shocks that I probably got $100 in labor and $40 in material on. Whatever. This stuff's all looking good. We are now mixing up some more of this Poppy's glossed out clear, and we'll just kind of juice these things all up and then walk out of here for the night because I don't really need to be kicking up a bunch of dust. So, man, look at those things. They turned out amazing. The paint's all glossy and nice. My little cheap shocks look like $100. Stoked on this. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start throwing this thing back together. That way it's kind of a truck again. Get in there. Hand hammer. That one wanted to put up a little bit of a fight. This thing's classy. Might as well throw the shocks on this thing. Come on. There we go. Look at that. Check that out. I even came back there and did the cotter pin trick on these studs. And the Ace Hardware down the street had castle nuts in stock. Total win. Here we go. The wishbone, the big ticket item on this suspension. Let's see how I can get this thing back in there. I think, there we go. Yeah, all right, we're getting it. Need a little bit of a hammer and a little bit of a alignment tool. There we go. We'll get this one in first. Everything's flopping around. Look at that. Heck yeah. It's so crazy I like built this stuff. Seems like years ago. And it's finally getting close to being out and getting used. This stuff's all getting like proper grade 8 hardware as well. And it's all stuff I had laying around from other jobs, which is pretty rad. If I would have had to go to the hardware store and buy all this right now, it would have been a small fortune. Let's stick with the theme of getting parts off the floor. That can go there. I don't know if this is just a mental block or what, but I really want to turn it around and work on the front of it over here. It seems like I get more work done that way. So I'm gonna like flip this thing around, get it off the lift, turn it around, move a bunch of stuff so that I can work on the front suspension and firewall over here. We are gonna kick some butt tonight. I'm telling you. We'll get what we can get done. How about that? We'll do the best we can. We'll do pretty good for a Saturday night. We might get something done. This thing is so rad. Ah, it looks so good. I'm stoked that I took all that time and painted everything. Yeah, I'm like way behind my made up deadline that I had. And I probably won't actually make it to the SEMA show. But I've got a truck that's like getting pretty dang sweet. Let's see right here where we left off. This shouldn't be bolted on. Boom. I have a lot of work to do in here. Firewall clearance, wheel tub, battery mount, power steering pump mount or reservoir mount. I got so much to do. Let's pull these front wheels off, the front fenders off, and get busy, figure out what's next. Oh, I guess I can set these in the bed. They aren't going anywhere anytime soon. One of the biggest things this truck needs is shocks in the front. It's already got airbags for the spring and to lift and lower it, and then it has this custom lower control arm. It's a stock control arm that I modified a bunch in order to build a strut rod basically off the back of it, turn it into an A-arm rather than having a strut rod that would have gone to the front like this truck would have had stock. And what's cool is this thing, it gets a bunch of lift considering the airbag system, and it gets a bunch of steering angle. So it works really well without shocks. I mean, it has a bunch of travel and steering without shocks, but going down the road, this thing's gonna like hop around like crazy. So I need to figure out how to do shocks in it. Typically on an airbag mini truck, you do the shock like a stud off the lower control arm, kind of like so, or tabs. And then you would do like a mount up off the frame here that kicks it out and gets the upper shock mount kind of right where this shock or this brake line tab is. So we're going to do the same. We're going to do that system. I just got to figure out the right length shocks and how far inboard they need to go and how to do it to where I end up with the least amount of like rubbing at full lock. There's really no way to have a wheel that's set in this far and still get full lock with an airbag system with the shocks on the outside there, unless I were to go up off the upper A-arm and do like an engine cage. But that ain't happening. We're gonna keep them simple and keep them down here. I'm just gonna take a little bit of time and figure it out so that it works as well as possible. All right out of the gate, I've got basically these three options. This is that Monroe shock that I have in the rear of this truck. They compress to 12 and extend to 19. So that's like a 7-inch travel shock, or I think it's right around 7.5. That would be a good candidate here, but it's taller than it needs to be. So I've also got this Rancho that was a leftover, and it's a fairly short, like gas charged, inexpensive shock. That one has about 6.25 inches of travel. This would be a good candidate too, and it's not too awful long. That one would end up being about 12 compressed and 18 extended, so it's really not much different than that Monroe shock. The benefit of the Monroe over this would be the diameter of it. This one's kind of a, I think this is a 2.25 inch diameter shock. Yeah, 2.25, and that Monroe is just under 2 inch. So this would be a good option, but the diameter is pretty gnarly. The diameter I'm just worried about is because the tire is going to come in and the wheel's going to try and grind into it. This is the one that I have that's probably the best candidate. This is a little tiny skyjacker hydromatic. This is just like an oil charged shock or oil filled shock, no nitrogen. And it compresses to right around 9.5, and it extends to around 13.75. This is a 4.5 inch travel shock. This is probably what I should run in the front of this. I just wish it was like a little smaller on the diameter, but we can get in here and start playing around with mounts and things and figure out how to make this thing work, I think. All right, I've been digging around for tabs and things. I've got these ones that have a 90-degree angle cut into them, and I feel like the lower, one of those is gonna work for the lower on the control arm. The outside one I'll probably have to like fabricate so that it kind of does a little different shape. And then I actually still have a set of these old, they are, let me show you the part number. These are like an old rock crawler trick. This is a Ford Super Duty shock tower from like 90s, from like a bull nose, brick nose, Super Duty. Why am I calling it a Super Duty? It's like a F350 shock tower. So anywho, this is a old school trick. You can see the part number here, E5TZ-18183-A. These ones were made in 2015. I've had them in my tool box, storage, cabinet, stash for quite a while. But I think I'm gonna be able to chop these things up, cut them shorter and at an angle, and they'll work right there on the frame rail really well. All right, I've got a rough idea. Where I want to cut this thing. So we will go ahead and, I guess, chop it up. I think that's my sweet spot. Can't go back there. It's kind of a like very small window of opportunity here. That's my jam right there. Got a little bit of clearance for the firewall. We got a little bit of clearance for this arm. We've got clearance for the steering on the back side. Let's see if the shock kind of fits in there. That's gonna be good. It's like right up against the frame. It's up relatively high. Yeah, I think we're getting close. Let me grab a little bit, actually let me throw another tack on this. I'm feeling pretty good about it. Let's say we were a shock tab and we wanted to live right there. Man, I think this thing's gonna be pretty dang good. I want the bolts to be basically parallel with the center line of the lower control arm. That way things don't get in any sort of bind. Right about there, I'm feeling pretty good about this thing. Let's see if I can get a back on this thing and see how it's gonna jive. This tab over here is gonna get remade tomorrow. Let's see how this thing cycles. If all goes well, the bolts aren't gonna get super upset, the bushings aren't gonna get all twisted, and the thing should cycle all the way down without issue. Come on down. Now the shock is super good. The bolts and bushings are totally happy. I'm just a little worried that we're gonna have major contact issues with the wheel on here. Let me throw one on and see. So if we're going lock to lock, this thing's gonna be basically locked up on the suspension travel. Probably right about there. Let's see. Here we go. How much steering angle can we get? Is that enough? That's pretty sharp. Could we get more? Yeah. Do I battle for every 1/16 of an inch? So here's the other thing. Like, yes, you could get more steering angle if you like notched the frame and pocketed it in and Frenched the shock in there farther. But I don't want to sacrifice the strength of the frame right here by cutting it up even farther than it is. I think if I build it where it's at, and if I like try to find a shock that might be a little smaller diameter than that, I think that's about as good as we can get. Truthfully, I am stoked. The bushings are all happy. It cycles well. If I lose a little bit of steering angle because of the shocks, I'm not gonna lose any sleep over that. It's Sunday. This is the day I'm supposed to leave, and I'm not even close, but whatever. It's sort of a made-up deadline. I lost sleep last night because I was tripping so hard on if I was gonna lose a little bit of steering angle. And then I came out here this morning, I cycled this thing, I checked it. This is where the tire is rubbing the shock, and it's totally acceptable. If you look in here really close, you'll see that at the same time the tire's rubbing the shock, the brake caliper is also pushing up against the airbag. So I think like, I'm not gonna change the brake caliper to airbag like ratio, so why should I totally trip on the shocks too much more? So I'm gonna go ahead and call this a win. I'm gonna make that lower tab that I didn't get to last night, and then we're gonna go duplicate it on the other side. I'm stoked. If I do need like a tiny bit of clearance after the fact, I can get that out of a little bit smaller bodied shock. And I was on Napa's website and they are all over the place. Like I can get cheap shocks that are slightly smaller than that skyjacker that may get me 1 or 2 more degrees of steering angle. So all is good. Let's make some tabs. Let's make tabs. All right, we got 2 tabs, and I just gotta grind them and drill them now. All right, I sanded the slag off of them, clamp them together, and grind them together. That way they totally match. Got my center punch mark. We'll go take it to the drill press. I'll drill it like 1/8 inch, then I'll mark the other tab, and then I'll drill both of them up to half. Tabs.